Hello, everybody. So, today we are going to continue talking about the Texas Revolution, the war between the United States and Mexico, and we're going to end with the Gold Rush and the Oregon Trail. So, let's review a little bit about the Texas Revolution. The Texas Revolution began in 1835 and lasted only a year until 1836. This wasn't an 8-year long war like the United States' war with the British Empire. And if you recall, Mexico invited all of these Americans to settle Texas so they could fight the Indians. But after the Americans got there, Mexico said that number one, you had to speak Spanish, and number two, you have to convert to Catholicism. And this began a movement that sought the independence of Texas. Now, I want to be very clear on one thing, and that is that that it was not a war for Texas to join the United States. Texas wanted to be its own country, and it was for a while. Texas was the Republic of Texas for a while. There were four countries in the on North America. There was Canada, which was still owned by the British Empire, the United States, Mexico. Those are the ones that are still here today. And there was also the country of Texas. And the man leading that country was Sam Houston. Sam Houston was another native Virginian. And as you recall, this man was Santa Anna. And Santa Anna was the person that was able to free Mexico from the Spanish Empire. So he would be like the George Washington of Mexico, and Sam Houston would be the George Washington of Texas. And we stopped at this place. This is the Alamo, a very famous place in American history, and we started talking about the siege of the Alamo. Sam Houston needed to make an army, a lot like George Washington needed to make an army, but he didn't have time. So he ordered a delaying action. That means a battle that you're not really meant to win, but you're meant to keep the enemy army away from you for a period of time, to delay, a delaying action at the Alamo. And 187 Texans fought 4,000 Mexican soldiers. 17 of those people there were from Virginia. And those 187 men were able to hold off these 4,000 Mexicans for almost 2 weeks, for 13 days. I read you this and I asked you to go watch these videos. Now, if you did watch the videos like I asked you to do, you will learn that they all died. Davy Crockett, Jim Bowie, and Colonel William Travis all perished at the Alamo fighting Santa Anna's army. This is a very famous picture. This is called Davy Crockett's Last Stand. Davy Crockett is here. Some of the women survived. Some of the men that were fighting had brought their wives and some of their children into the fort for protection, and Santa Anna let them go. And the women and children reported that David, I almost said David Bowie, who is a wonderful, wonderful musician. You should go look him up. Davy Crockett was the last man standing. He actually ran out of bullets, turned his gun around, and used it as a club. And he was actually the last American to go down. And here we have Davy Bowie doing that. Remember the Alamo was the saying of the day. After the Alamo died, remember the Alamo became the rallying cry. A rallying cry is something that gets you pumped, something that gets you angry, something that makes you want to go after the enemy. So, when the Alamo fell, Sam Houston started saying, "Remember the Alamo." And the sacrifice that these people made at the Alamo gave Sam Houston time to gather his army, to train his army, to make his army ready for Santa Anna. And at the Battle of Jacinto, Sam Houston annihilated Santa Anna's army. He completely wiped it out, destroyed it. And Santa Anna was forced to sign a treaty recognizing the independence of the Republic of Texas. Here we have a dime store novel book, Remember the Alamo, and once again we have the famous depiction of Davy Crockett fighting with his gun as a club. All right, so Texas was free, but it was not part of the United States. As I said, Texas was its own country. Here we have a map of what the United States looked like then. In pink, we have states. It's not quite an orange color, in a dark yellow, in a kind of dark gold color, we have what the United States owned, but were not states. In gray are stuff that we didn't own yet, and in the yellow is Texas. Now, Santa Anna went back to Mexico, but he kind of didn't honor his treaty. He went back on it, and he said that in the treaty said that Texas' southern border is the Rio Grande. If you remember the Rio Grande, we learned about that when we were learning about rivers all the way down here. And when Santa Anna got back to Texas, he said, no, it was the Galveston River, which is this river right here. So Texas and Mexico started fighting almost immediately after the treaty was signed again. And 9 years later, Mexico, under Santa Anna, again tried to conquer Texas. This is kind of like the War of 1812. The British lost to the United States in the Revolutionary War, but years later, they tried to reconquer us again. That's kind of what Mexico did. Texas declared its independence from Mexico. Mexico invaded Texas. Texas won. A few years later, Mexico invades it again to try to reconquer it. Now, Sam Houston and the rest of Texas pretty much knew that, okay, the army is too big. Our army is not that, or the Mexican army is too big. The Texas army isn't that big. And they were really afraid of losing. Also, most of these people were born Americans anyway. Sam Houston, like I said, was from Virginia. So Texas told the United States that if we sent our army to defeat Mexico, Texas would actually join the United States. And the president at the time, his name was President Polk. And what do you think he said? If you said yes, you are correct. Yes, sir, we have a deal. The elderly gentleman on the left, that is President Polk. And in case you were wondering, yes, that is a mullet. He is the president with the mullet. So yes, sir, we have a deal. So America, or I should say the United States of America, sent its army into Texas to protect Texas. The Texas army the Mexican army retreated back to Mexico, and then the American army followed it. And the United States invaded Mexico all the way down to Mexico City. Mexico City is right here on the map. So this was Mexico. Everything in green was Mexico in the early 1800s. Mexico lost this war, which means that Mexico had to give up everything north of the Rio Grande. This would be the areas of Texas, New Mexico, which is right here, and California. Arizona, Colorado, Utah, Nevada, California. So everything north right here, Mexico ceded, which means they were conquered, to the United States. This was not our first foreign war, but it was the first foreign war in which we claimed territory. This was the first war that the United States fought, in which afterwards we gained land. We will fight several wars like that in our history. Now, I wanted to put these three pictures up because these three people all fought in the Mexican-American War, and they will all change the history and the destiny of the United States. And I would bet all of my money that every single one of you has heard of these people before. Give up? Well, this is what these gentlemen looked like during the Mexican-American War in the 1840s. And this is what these gentlemen looked like in the Civil War during the 1860s. On the far left, we have United States General Ulysses S. Grant, General and later President. On the far left is him again. This is him as a young man fighting the Mexican-American War. In the middle, we have Confederate States General Robert Edward Lee. Here is Robert E. Lee during the Civil War. And finally, on the right, we have General Thomas Stonewall Jackson of the Confederate States during the Mexican-American War. And here he is during the Civil War. General Jackson became very famous during the Mexican-American War because he had a duel with a Mexican captain. Now, Jackson, not Stonewall Jackson this time, he hasn't earned that nickname yet, but he was a captain. Captain Jackson decided to fight a duel with a Mexican captain. Captain Jackson was in charge of the American cannons of a portion of the army. And everybody remembers what a duel is, right? You have you stand on one side of the field with a gun, the other guy stands on one side of the field with a gun, and you both fire at each other. Well, Jackson was a cannon commander, so instead of using guns, Jackson fought the duel with cannons, and the entire army stopped to watch this duel between the two cannon commanders. Jackson won, and the rest of the army was put to flight. The Mexican army was put to flight, and the United States Army chased them all the way down to Mexico. Just a few years after the Mexican-American War, remember, we conquered California. California did belong to Mexico. Now it belongs to the United States. Just a few years after we conquered California, gold was discovered. Gold was discovered in California in 1848 by James W. Marshall. Now, James W. Marshall didn't want to tell anybody. James W. Marshall said, shh, we're not going to tell anybody. We're not going to tell anybody about the gold here. Except his buddies and friends told 300,000 people about the gold there. And all of those 300,000 people decided to cross the continent from, let's go back and look at the map, cross the continent from the East Coast to the West Coast to make it rich. This was a quote from a song, "Go west, young man, haven't you been told? California's full of whiskey, women, and gold." For a few years, California was seen as the golden land where anybody could make it rich. And these miners, the people that went out to mine for gold, founded the cities of Sacramento and San Francisco. If any of you are fans of the San Francisco 49ers, well, this is where they got their name. San Francisco was founded in 1849 by a bunch of gold miners. And these miners were called the Miner 49ers because that was the year they went there. We're going to look at some pictures of the miners. So I'll go clockwise, starting at the top left. The top left shows a snow-covered mountain and all of the miners going up that mountain. Now, I'll be honest with you, it's a little bit dishonest of me because this is actually the Alaska Gold Rush. But I thought the theme worked, and a comparable number of people in the Alaska Gold Rush, which was a few years later, went to California. So these people so this amount of people would have been the same crossing the country to get to California. On the top right, we have a strange looking contraption. Can you guess what it is? It is a camera. That is one of the very first cameras. On the bottom right, we have another mine. We have a trawl. So the gold was found in a river. So the people would go to the river and see if they could find gold. Little bitty gold flakes all the way up to nuggets and sometimes big things of gold. Now, the big things of gold you hardly ever found, and that is why very few people made it rich. Mostly they were finding the little bitty flakes. And the interesting thing about this picture is, can you guess the ethnicity of the gentleman on the right? They are Chinese. This is one of the very first pictures of Asian Americans. In the beginning, the United States was solidly on the East Coast on the Atlantic Ocean, and it was a beacon for European Americans. African Americans, of course, came, but they were enslaved. It will become a beacon of hope for them much later on. But during the gold rush, America began immigrating, or excuse me, Asians started immigrating to the United States and seeing it as the land of opportunity for the first time. And on the bottom left here, we have another trowel and a bunch of miners. I'm not going to get into that for just a minute. You're going to hear my lovely singing voice just now. So going on with the thought that you guys are no longer little kids anymore, and you can now start learning about the songs that you sang as little kids. Remember Ring Around the Rosie? That was about the Black Death. Today, you're going to learn about Oh My Darling Clementine. And you're going to listen to me sing, and it's going to be wonderful. And when I get famous for my singing, you guys are going to be like, yeah, he was my teacher. I hated his singing. God, don't make me listen to it again. All right, anyway. Num, 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 num. Oh my darling, oh my darling, oh my darling Clementine, you are lost and gone forever, dreadful sorry Clementine. In a cavern, in a canyon, excavating for a mine, lived a miner 49er and his daughter Clementine. Drove her ducklings to the water every morning just at 9. Hit a foot against a splinter, fell into the foaming brine. Ruby lips above the water, blowing bubbles soft and fine. But at last I was no swimmer, so I lost my Clementine. Oh, my darling, oh, my darling, oh, my darling Clementine. You are lost and gone forever, dreadful sorry Clementine. If you sang that song as a child, that is about a man who is too busy looking for gold to watch his child, and she falls into a river and drowns. The end. Yeah, children's songs are really dark, aren't they? Something to think about. All right. So moving on to the Oregon Territory. Now, the Oregon Territory, which is in both orange and brown, was claimed by both the United States and the British Empire. And a treaty in 1846 split the land at the 49th parallel. And we said, British Empire said, both of us, very adult, very mature, said, look, let's not go to war against each other again. Let's just split it. Canada will get the top half, United States will get the bottom half, and let's be done with it. And that was a very good thing. To get to Oregon, we made what's called the Oregon Trail. And the Oregon Trail was a 2,170-mile dirt road from Independence, Missouri, over the Great Plains along the Platte River, crossing the Rocky Mountains, up the Snake River, finally following the Columbia River, all the way to Oregon City. Oregon City is today called Portland, Oregon. In the summer of 2017, one of my best friends in the entire world decided that he and a few of his friends were going to move to Portland, Oregon. And I said, I'll drive the moving truck. So in 2018, I drove this route. And let me tell you, the Rocky Mountains are a whole lot taller than our mountains here in Covington, Virginia. Now, the Oregon Trail was very popular over a 20-year period. 1840s, 1850s, 1860s, a little bit more than 20 years. People decided to go to Oregon to have a better life. There was lots of land out west. The east was becoming crowded. People were gathering up in the cities. Lots of farmers were having lots of children and parceling out their land, splitting up their land. So one kid only got half the land that the dad got. And it was becoming very crowded. So people were moving west. Around 400,000, so almost 500,000 people used the Oregon Trail to make a better life for themselves. And they would go in parties called wagon trains. Here we have a wagon train. And this was usually people that didn't know each other, that had never met before, would meet up in Independence, Missouri, right there, and they would make an alliance among themselves, make a contract for themselves that they would all protect each other, that they would all watch out for each other for the duration of this trip. Most of them made it. The Oregon Trail has a bad reputation of a lot of people died. Most people made it. Others did not. And I saved something. I read a book about the Donner Party last year. We're going to get to them in just a minute. I saved something last year from this book, and I'm going to read it to you now. I just lost it. Now, when I said most of the people made it, I meant most of the adults. Sorry. Quote, The number of ways in which children might come to harm along the trail was staggering, and women who had to drive a team or repair a wagon were unable to devote much time to watch after them. The children fell under wagon wheels and were crushed to death or crippled for life. They wandered off into the tall grass and were never seen again. Occasionally, they were abducted by Native Americans. Much more frequently, they drowned when swept away by rivers their families were trying to ford. Drowning incidents were so common, in fact, that some of their mothers wrote their children's names in indelible ink on labels and sewed the labels into the children's clothes. It didn't prevent them from drowning, but sometimes allowed grieving mothers to identify the body that had been in the water for too long. Children were bitten by rattlesnakes, struck by lightning, trampled by unruly oxen or horses, pummeled by hailstones as large as turkey eggs, and shot by daily accidental discharges from the guns their fathers carried. They died of measles, diphtheria, whooping cough, influenza, tuberculosis, typhoid fever, malaria, infected cuts, food poisoning, mumps, and the smallpox. You know, I'm not really sure which one I like more. Wandered off into the tall grass and were never seen again, or just struck by lightning. Horrifying. So, I believe the moral of the story is that I'd make it. You wouldn't. Sorry. And then there was the Donner Party. Now, the Donner Party were a group of people that left way too late, and they got snowed in. The mountains are very inhospitable. That means not good, not hospitable, not not good for people to be in at certain times of the year. And these people got snowed in and they ran out of food. And long story short, they survived by eating each other. If you would like to know more about that, you can look it up. All right, so we are going to stop here today. If we were still in school, we would have done an activity where you guys would have played the Oregon Trail. The Oregon Trail is a very old video game from either the late 80s or the early 90s. And it's a game that I guarantee every single one of your parents played in school growing up. If you would like to look that up, I very much encourage you to do so. Look up Oregon Trail video game. If you can play it on your Chromebook, that would be awesome, because that's what we were going to do for a day or two in school. So that is your homework. Look up the Oregon Trail video game, and if you're in for a good horror story, look up the Donner Party. All right, guys. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you learned something, and I will see you. Well, I'm not sure when I'll see you, but you'll see me next time. Bye.